A lot to talk about. I thought I would start with sort of the issue du jour du week, the debt limit crisis. I've seen both former President Trump say that he's fine with the default, and a lot of Republicans talking about prioritization being something they're comfortable with. I know one of the sectors that would be most impacted is transportation infrastructure. So just wanted to give you a chance to opine on that.
It's easy politically to go out there and say anything that isn't defense, any non defense discretionary spending isn't that important and we ought to cut it. Until you look at what that actually means, and transportation's a great example. If you look at the House Republican budget framework that they voted through and passed on the floor, if that were actually to carry the day, that would mean that we would have to stop our progress hiring air traffic controllers at the very moment when I think most Americans realize we need more, not less. In fact, there'd be no way to absorb those cuts without hundreds of air traffic control towers shutting down altogether. On railroad safety, something that rightly has a lot of attention in the US right now, we would be in a situation where tens of thousands of miles of track fewer would be inspected every year for safety. There would be cuts to our capacity to manage hazardous material. And obviously, more generally, the impact on transportation at the very time when we're finally making the investments we've needed to make as a country would take us in the wrong direction with damaging economic as well as safety consequences. So, if you really want to slash everything that isn't the Pentagon, you got to be ready to own those positions. And I think it's very telling as we have gone out to talk to the American public about what those cuts would mean, that none of these congressional Republicans who voted for those cuts have actually stepped forward to defend them and explain why air traffic control ought to be cut, or why it's a good thing that you might have to wait a couple more hours in a security line at an airport because of the cuts to TSA. These are real impacts that are going to have a real effect on our everyday lives, not to mention on our economy.
To what extent do you think that these members that passed that bill, and it wasn't easy for them to pass it at the time, were just not aware of what some of those cuts would mean, or do you think it was largely performative on the political side?
Hard for me to gauge what motivated these different members, and within that caucus, I know some of them are probably motivated differently than others. What I know is that this is not what the American people want, and we understand that the budget will be the result of a negotiation. It's natural and fitting and proper to negotiate over the details of the budget, which is why the president submitted a detailed budget as a start for negotiation. What is not normal and not appropriate is to negotiate over whether to take the economy off a cliff with a default, which is unacceptable. And whether you're talking to the business community, whether you're talking to just ordinary people wondering what it means for them, it's very clear that default is not an option, and we should begin, not end these negotiations with that premise.